Hello, and welcome to Belt and Road, My Story, a special program on CGTN, coming to you live from Beijing. I'm Tian Wei. Since the Belt and Road Initiative was proposed more than 5 years ago, many thought it was just a project about roads, railways, and possibly rail links and ports. But actually, as time goes by, people have realized the heart of BRI, Belt and Road Initiative, is really about one word: connectivity, building a platform linking people and cultures. But how? In fact, how is BRI going to transform our lives and our future, our shared future? We asked that question on our CGTN website. Over just a few months, over the past 4 months, in fact, we have got more than 100 entries from 42 countries. And today, we have invited 4 winners from that essay contest. They are here to join us in our special program today. But before they get onto the stage, let me test the water. Let's see how much of our audience here today know and informed about the Belt and Road Initiative. Any volunteers? Over there? Okay, let me move over there. It's always very hard to be the first one to answer the questions, but I prepared for you a basic one. How about that? So would you like to stand up, if you don't mind? Where you're from?
I'm from Cape Town, South Africa.
Oh, all the way from down south?
Yes, the
South
bottom of
Africa.
Africa, yeah.
Oh, 我们应该欢迎他. We should welcome him. So, tell me, when and where was the Belt and Road Initiative being proposed?
It was proposed by Chinese President Xi Jinping in 2013 during a state visit to Kazakhstan.
Is that right? Yeah. Is that right? Wow. Correct, 100% correct. We have a small gift for you from CGTN. My friend will bring to you later.
谢谢.
Thank you so much. 不错，真棒. Very good. Let me go to the other side to see if there's any more volunteers from this side. Okay, well, we have one. You do not even know the questions, you already volunteered.
Yes.
See this courageous woman. Which country are you from?
I'm from Myanmar.
From Myanmar. Welcome from Myanmar. So my question for you is, Belt and Road Initiative. People would wonder, what exactly is the belt? And what exactly is the road referred to? Your answer is?
I think it refers to the new Silk Road economic belt, which connect to China, with Europe through Central and Western Asia, and also it is 21st century maritime Silk Road, which connect China with Southeast Asia countries and also Africa and Europe.
Very comprehensive. I'm impressed, totally. Thank you so much. For a small token for you as well from CGTN later. Let me ask a last question for this round of Q&A. Okay, we still got opportunities for the near future. So do you know any specific important projects about BRI, Belt and Road Initiative? Anyone know? Raise your hand from any side. Okay, so which direction should I go? We got 2 over there. Can I go there? Yeah. Okay, thank you. It's a democracy over here. Okay, great. So still standing on this side. So tell me, what exactly are some of the projects as long as you know?
Yes, I'm from Pakistan. My name is Muhammad Imran, and I know about the pilot project of BRI, Belt and Road Initiative. It's called China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. And under the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, we have a lot of projects in energy sector and infrastructure building and the one and only Gwadar port.
Oh, okay. I think all of them, you got it right. And of course, the list goes on because in your individual countries, many of you coming from developing and emerging economy, there are different projects going on for the BRI cooperation. Thank you. Really appreciate it. I think we have a very strong team right here sitting in the audience. They're already quite informed about the Belt and Road Initiative. But you know what? After listening to the 4 speakers today, I'm sure you're going to know better about this initiative and how is it going to impact our lives. So first of all, ladies and gentlemen, let's meet Mubarak Mugabe from Uganda in Africa. In his country, there's a lot of infrastructure projects already being established as a result of Belt and Road Initiative. And he has his stories to tell as to how those infrastructure projects are really changing people's lives. And one footnote, I have to tell you, I got to know Mubarak. He's a very opinionated young gentleman and certainly have a lively story to tell. So let's put our hands together and welcome Mubarak.
Thank you. The Belt and Road Initiative has contributed to the development of many African countries. For my own country, Uganda, a number of infrastructure projects have been put in place. The Kampala-Entebbe Expressway that connects the congested Kampala city to the Entebbe International Airport is also under the same framework of the Belt and Road. Before the construction of this expressway, it used to take me over 2 hours to drive from Kampala to the airport. As we speak now, the project cuts the driving time to 25 minutes. Other infrastructure projects have been put in place under this same framework. Industrial parks scattered in many parts of the country have not only contributed to the economic activities in my country, but created jobs and also passing on skills to the young generation. However, this wonderful cooperation is facing negative criticism from many parts of the world. They say that this Belt and Road Initiative is a debt trap for African countries, and at the same time that it is a colonial scheme for China to colonize Africa. These sentiments are being spread all over the continent of Africa, but I will handle these 2 issues today. I'll start with the colonial sentiment. The proponents of this sentiment only aim at discrediting China in the eyes of Africans because they know that the Belt and Road Initiative offers a win-win cooperation and at the same time unlocking Africa's strategic bottlenecks. Africa for a long time has faced numerous challenges. A few years back, President of Uganda, Yoweri Museveni, identified 10 strategic bottlenecks, which to him have hindered Uganda and Africa as a whole from developing. Key among the bottlenecks is the poor infrastructure. This is what the Belt and Road is trying to unlock. Can you imagine? Road connectivity in Africa is a miserable thing. Electricity supply is not ideal. Some African countries, a kilowatt per capita of electricity is 17. In the developed world, is over 15,000. No country can develop without electricity because the cost of doing business in that country would be extremely high. So if the Belt and Road Initiative is a colonial scheme, the projects done by China are really very welcome because they are trying to, reduce the cost of doing business in African countries. In my country, for instance, a kilowatt per capita of electricity is at 200, which is not even a half of what is required. But I am optimistic that after the completion of the 183 megawatt dam project in Isimba and the Karuma 600 megawatt dam project, a kilowatt per capita of electricity in Uganda would even triple, and the cost of doing business in that country would be slightly lower, and hence creating job opportunities for the young generation, and at the same time increasing on the production of my country.
Yay.
If the Belt and Road Initiative was indeed, if the Belt and Road Initiative was a colonial scheme, I would be proud to have a colonizer who labors to reduce the cost of doing business in his colony, like Uganda, By the way, the real colonizers impoverished our continent, looted of its resources, took away raw materials, later on introduced finished products. Africa has for a long time been a market for these products, hence remaining poor. The Belt and Road, through industrial parks and free trade zones, is establishing and constructing industries. These industries are making locally made products, at the same time providing job opportunities for the young generation and also passing on skills to the people. This is really wonderful and deserves a hand clap. The second point and the second issue they raise is about the debt trap. The proponents of this criticism forget one thing, that even before the Belt and Road Initiative, Africa used to get loans from all over the world, from the developed world, from bigger institutions. But you know why the African countries have opted for the Belt and Road Initiative loans? The answer is simple. Loans from developed world come with stringent conditions which are unfair to many African countries. These loans, these conditions come in the name of ensuring human rights in our countries, but ending up engaging in our internal politics of our countries. This is unacceptable because we are sovereign countries, but the loans secured under the Belt and Road Initiative come with fair conditions and, of course, provide a win-win cooperation. That's why African countries feel comfortable working under the Belt and Road Initiative than opting for loans secured from the developed world. The proponents of this criticism should also bear in mind that African countries have now appreciated the contribution of these infrastructure projects because they are reducing the cost of doing business and they are connecting Africa to the rest of the world. I was impressed by the report on the performance of the Belt and Road Initiative as released by the Prime Minister of China early this year during the opening session of the National People's Congress in the Chinese political season. He said that over 150 countries have so far signed Belt and Road Initiative agreements. The last time I counted, Africa has only 54 countries, meaning the rest of the countries come from the rest of the world. So if the Belt and Road Initiative was indeed a debt trap, why are other countries outside Africa opting for it? We must understand that the Belt and Road Initiative is building industries in our countries, is constructing roads in our continent just to make life easier for Africans, whereas the critics will only go and spreading on propaganda in Africa. The projects which are in Africa are now visible in my country. The projects and the results are now visible. And of course, a shared future for mankind is unstoppable. So if the Belt and Road Initiative was a debt trap for Africa and also a colonial scheme, it is a development one. You know what? Because it empowers me, my people, and my country. And whoever fights it is not only fighting China, but fighting Africa. Thank you very much.
All right. Woo. Woo. Mr. Strong Argument. Thank you so much, Mubarak, coming from Uganda for us, from Africa all the way. Thank you. It is not just in Africa, but also in the other countries as well. Next, we are going to meet one coming from one country that boasts one of the best honeymoon destinations in the world. Which one? Maldives. Yes, exactly. And shall we put our hands together and welcome this wonderful lady, Fatma Sarah.
Good evening, everyone. I witnessed the making of history in my small island nation of Maldives in 2018 with the opening of its first cross-sea bridge. This bridge was developed by China under the Belt and Road Initiative. The strategically placed bridge connected the capital Male with 2 more islands, which includes the airport island and a residential island. The 2.1 kilometer bridge is officially called Sinamale Bridge, but a lot of us actually refer to it as China-Maldives Friendship Bridge. Let's talk about why this bridge was a bridge of convenience for the people of Maldives. Our capital is considered one of the most densely populated capitals in the world. We have a total population of 380,000, out of which 1/3 actually lives in the capital area. So you can imagine how much traffic and commute is required between these 3 islands, which is connected only by ferry before the bridge. So before Sinamale Bridge was opened, anyone who wanted to go to the airport had to take a 10 to 15-minute ride. This is difficult if you are carrying luggage, traveling with the elderly or children, or if you work in the airport. And then there's Hulumale, where a lot of residents live due to the capital Male being too small to live in. So they have to commute every day to their offices, schools, and for other purposes. And this ride actually from Hulumale to the capital takes 20 minutes. But this all changed after the bridge. Right now, we don't have to take any boat rides. We can just go straight to the airport from the capital or from Hulumale Island. And those who actually require to travel between the capital and Hulumale just takes a leisurely ride in their motorcycles or cars. So transportation has been made easy for the residents living in the capital area, as well as those who actually visit the country and goes to stay in the numerous hotels that we have in the capital area. The Belt and Road Initiative has brought many benefits to the Maldives, including economically actually developing the capital area due to the bridge. Earlier, because of scarcity of land, a lot of businesses didn't have space to develop any business opportunities in the capital, but Hulumale was developed. Nevertheless, it was difficult for them to actually open a business and reap benefit from it if the capital that they invested in the business wasn't returned when they actually didn't have customers. And they didn't have customers because there was difficulty in getting there. So the bridge actually made it possible for people to travel to the Hulumale, where a lot of businesses opened right after the bridge. So it not only socially helped the people to travel and connected the people, it also brought immense economic development to the area. The Sinamale Bridge will forever be known as a cornerstone project for this and many other reasons. This project has deepened the relationship between China and Maldives, obviously, and developing the bridge in this area was considered impossible, but the Belt and Road Initiative made it possible. And this project has changed the lives of the people, and it is always going to be known as the biggest mega project conducted in the country. While this bridge was developed by China Harbor Engineering, the government of China provided $116 million for the project. This is a project which cost $200 million. So you can imagine this is a huge assistance of grant-free aid. The government also provided a $72 million loan aid, but that is very small compared to what they gave for the project. I believe all these projects were made possible due to the mutual respect and understanding between the two countries once BRI was signed. And this has changed the lives of Maldivians for the better. Even before BRI, China has been working in Maldives, developing housing units, developing roads in the islands. And I believe that they will continue to assist Maldives in the future under the BRI initiative and other initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. Very calm, telling the story, what's going on. and what's happening right now. Wonderful job. You girl, go over there. Give her a round of applause. Great job. It's about a bridge, but it's not a bridge only for transformation. It's a bridge building up people's optimism for the future. It's a bridge that could help us to have a shared future. Thank you so much. Next, we're going to meet a gentleman coming from Russia. This gentleman has a very big family. Unfortunately, they're scattered around in different parts of the town and the country. And he wants to have more frequent family reunions. Is it possible? Let's ask Oscar Galiv from Russia. 有请. Let's welcome.
Good evening, everyone. When I was growing up in Russia in the 90s, my family would frequently travel between the two largest cities in the country, Moscow and St. Petersburg, and my native town of Kazan in Tatarstan. You see, our family was scattered among these three cities, and me and my mom would take a train ride every couple of months from one place to another, and I would spend each season in a new city. And each of such rides from Moscow to Kazan would take about 14 hours. And that's why many of my adolescent and childhood memories have to do with just this experience of long train rides, with how my family would just plan their life according to train schedules, really. And today, Moscow-Kazan high-speed railway line is one of pilot BRI projects in the country. And it is part of a much more ambitious project to connect Moscow directly to Beijing with a high-speed rail. And this project would not only cut the time of travel between Moscow and Kazan to about 3 hours, but it also has a potential to boost the passenger connections in many Russian cities and in Russian-speaking countries of Central Asia. If successful, this project could transform the region in the same way that high-speed railway boom transformed China. In just a decade after the first high-speed line was launched in China in 2008, the country already built more high-speed networks than the rest of the world combined, including some record-breaking Hong Kong to Beijing being the longest operational line, and Shanghai to Beijing being the fastest in the world. And everyone who has traveled or lived in China in the past few years knows just how much it transformed the whole experience of traveling in the country. And new land connections of the BRI have already started to fill in a significant infrastructure deficit common to many of the post-Soviet countries. In Uzbekistan, for example, the line was just finished 2 years ago. And similar projects are on the way to develop railway connection from China to Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan, as well as a Trans-Kazakhstan railway line from the fast-growing BRI Kyrgyz East Gateway and the western ports of the country. As a result, connections which had been considered impossible before have become a reality. And distances which previously took days to cross are now just reduced to a few hours. My home region, the Republic of Tatarstan, being at the heart of Russia's BRI initiative, will probably undergo drastic changes with this new project. And while the BRI is usually covered in terms of its big picture, negative and positive political implication, we often forget how it just transforms the people's life on the ground and their everyday experiences, be it a weekend trip to see your parents or commuting to a nearby city for work. New transport connections profoundly transform and change our lifestyles. They allow us to travel places we have never been before and meet different sorts of people. This wider, resonating change is the reason why BRI is much more than just about economics and politics. It will have a long-lasting impact on societies and cultures of the participant countries. And if for me personally, this just might mean being able to see my grandmother more often, for someone else, this might be about finding a new job opportunity. But for everyone, Belt and Road brings closer a shared future, a future in which the world inevitably will be more connected than ever before. Thank you very much.
Love it. So tell me, how many family reunions you're having each year now as a result?
Well, quite a few in each city, but hoping to have more.
To have more. And say hi to our grandma.
Hi, Grandma.
Thank you so much, Oscar. Thank you. wonderful gentleman coming from Russia over there. Okay, now let's have our next speaker. A world-renowned destination for tourism she is coming from, and she's going to help us understand whether Belt and Road Initiative is really likely to boost tourism in her country, and whether young people will have more jobs as a result. So let's put our hands together and welcome Leslie Fonua Tale from Fiji. Hello.
Thank you, Tian.
Hello.
Hello. Nice to meet you.
Nice to you.
Fijians continue to celebrate the infrastructure marvel that has now become a key transportation link on the island. In January last year, Fiji's Prime Minister, Mr. Vorengi Bainimarama, opened the newly redeveloped Stinson Parade Bridge, which is one of Fiji's biggest projects under the BRI. The bridge, which is located alongside Suva's Municipal Market, is located in the central business district and is accessed by countless of Fijians on any given day. One can imagine the fanfare and excitement that rang through the capital city on the day of the opening. The bridge meant less time spent in traffic and more time spent with families for ordinary Fijians. Smooth travel in and out of the capital city can mean nothing to a stranger, but to ordinary Fijians, it means the world. The bridge also runs alongside Fiji's main seaport, the King's Wharf, which makes it convenient for tourism and for trade. Fiji became a signatory to the BRI in November last year, stressing connectivity in 5 key areas, namely policy coordination, financial coordination, facilities connectivity, enhanced trade and investment, and people-to-people bonding. The Belt and Road has also strengthened diplomatic ties of 44 years between China as the second largest economy in the world and Fiji, the socio-economic and geographical hub of the South Pacific. Development in the island nation with a population of 0.9 million has seen a steady growth in recent years, in part due to the assistance rendered by the Chinese government. Multi-billion-dollar projects also include the Vatuanga Bridge, a Suva Civic Center auditorium, and the state-of-the-art sports facility for Maris Brothers High School. Through BRI, China has also trained 149 Fijian professionals in the areas of women empowerment, youth development, climate change, media, health, education, and other aspects. These projects are testament to the popularity of the BRI initiative. BRI provides a lifeline to modern, growing, and ambitious nations that aspire to gain regional and global prominence through infrastructure development and trade. At this year's Chinese New Year, Fiji's Prime Minister, Mr. Vorengi Bainimarama, acknowledged the Chinese Fijian community as invaluable partners in Fiji's record-breaking economic growth. With BRI, one does not have to look far to see policies and plans come to fruition. For a country like Fiji, world-renowned as a tourism destination, infrastructure development through BRI helps to sustain the growing demands of tourism in the country. This year has been dubbed as China-Pacific Tourism Year, with air connectivity top of the agenda. The Pacific China Development Initiative will run from 2019 to 2023 with the aim of preparing China to be Pacific ready and the Pacific to be China ready. The initiative will also examine the need to sustainably develop and promote the Pacific in niche market segments in China. Fiji's participation in the Belt and Road project contributes to the success of a global project with ease for international trade. Hats off to the Chinese government for breathing new life to a small Pacific island nation in the Pacific. Thank you.
Thank you. And I should say hats off to the wonderful people in Fiji, bring us all the latest. Thank you so much, Leslie, coming from Fiji. Thank you. Beautifully done. And I really enjoyed that photo about the high school students. Their smiles on the face really touched all the hearts, I'm sure. Well, we've been hearing a lot from our 4 speakers coming from different parts of the world, their own stories. As we are listening to it right here in this special studio, CGTN is also broadcasting our special event live on different kinds of social media platforms, be it Facebook or Twitter or YouTube or Weibo or our CGTN app. So you can follow us right now on all these domains and tune in to our special edition of the program. Talking about the 4 speeches. Now, all of you coming from all over the world probably have a much better idea of what BRI is. Not only that, but rather how it's transforming our lives. So, about that, I want to go once again to our audience and find out whether they have their own stories to tell. I understand sitting over here today, we have about quite a dozen young journalists coming from developing and emerging economies. Just look at the faces. I'm so happy. So let me ask you from this side, any volunteer? Are you having a cold with a face mask? So let me ask our friends here, anyone want to volunteer to tell stories from your parts of the world? If you want to, raise up your hand. Not really? Okay. What about from the other side? We have a very silent audience. I have to ask, well, which one? Okay, oh, gentlemen over there. All right then. Tell me about what you think, what you heard, and what are stories coming from your country. First of all, which country you're from?
I am from Africa.
Which
from
country?
Ethiopia.
Ethiopia. Welcome.
Yes.
Beautiful country, Ethiopia.
Yeah. The Belt and Road Initiative changes my country from landlocked into land-linked country. Do you believe that? Before, we don't have ports that we can communicate with other countries. But the Belt and Road Initiative, the railway, which is 800 kilometers from Addis Ababa, the capital city of Ethiopia, to Djibouti, which is the seaport of the Red Sea, it connects. So before, it takes 3 days by lorry or by bus to reach Djibouti. But now, it takes only 10 hours to reach Djibouti, which is a port.
Thank you.
So it transforms my country a lot.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for sharing your story. Any other volunteers? If you want, you can raise your hand. Over here, this gentleman. Tell us which country you're from, who you are.
I'm from Pakistan. My name is Mohammed
Closer the
Imran.
microphone. Yes.
I'm from Pakistan. As I told earlier that CPEC, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, it brings a lot of development in Pakistan through Kashgar to Gwadar. So now, since last 5 years, and now we have roads connectivity from whole the country under the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. We have motorways, expressways, and we were facing load shedding problem, energy crisis. But after the BRI project, many energy projects completed, and now Pakistan is lightning. We want to thank CPEC and BRI project.
We want to thank you.
Thank you.
Very hardworking Pakistani people also. That's how projects could become a success, right? Not only the stories, but also since you're a journalist sitting here, I really want to ask a professional question. What role media should play in get all our wonderful stories across to our viewers around the world, or on newspaper, or on the internet? Meanwhile, what kinds of resources that we should tap into in order to know the latest development of developing and emerging economies like those that we are coming from? Any volunteers? What role of the media? Over there, that gentleman. Yes. Where you're from, sir?
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. My name is Elvis Muraranganda. I'm from a beautiful country called Namibia.
Okay, from Namibia.
Yes.
Good to see you.
I just want to say 2 things, 3 things quickly, if I may. The first thing, when it comes to the role of the media in terms of telling the BRI story, it starts with capacitating and educating journalists within newsrooms as to the true essence of what the BRI is and what BRI means and the end goal of a BRI. Without an informed media, without an informed journalist team, there is no way that the BRI stories can be best told. I'm from Namibia, and before I came here, such a shame, I did not know anything. I knew about BRI, but not to the extent that I know about BRI now. So there is a lack of information for the journalists themselves within newsrooms in order for them to be able to perform a better task. Secondly, most stories that we hear, that's why we hear things of death trap, colonialism. It's because the story is being told from a China-Africa perspective and not from an Africa-China perspective. That is where the win-win situation comes in. Because in most cases, what we are seeing and reading is about what China wants to achieve. But in a win-win situation, it has to be China-Africa, Africa-China relations.
Right, so it's your job as a journalist from Africa
definitely.
to tell your perspectives and your side of the story.
Definitely. And that leads me to my last point, and this is what we have seen. And thank you, CGTN, for this beautiful initiative of my colleagues here who have won the essays. We have seen a lot of eye stories, and this other type of stories we need to see and to read in Africa. We usually read about BRI at the government-to-government level and not at the human interest level. We need to see these stories, how a new road affects the ordinary citizen in my country, for example.
Yes.
And so these eye stories, I think once we transform that, we'll be able to tell better BRI stories. Thank you.
The eye stories, the real stories on the ground from the real people. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure.
This gentleman coming from Nairobi. Any other volunteers you want to tell how journalists will be able to do our job to tell more of the real stories on the ground? And by the way, small token coming from CGTN for your souvenir. Anyone else? Raise up your hand. I can see you from here. All right. I think, all right, a gentleman over there.
My name is Bilal Ahmed Sabri. I'm from Pakistan. So
Also, you're coming from Pakistan. Which
Yeah.
region are you from? Different from this gentleman? Which region are you from?
I'm from
Islamabad. And you?
I'm also from Islamabad.
Oh, okay. Your neighbors, competitors possibly, to journalists.
So-
Okay, go ahead, sir.
So yes, some journalists working from Pakistan in the Beijing and covered a lot of stories about BRI, and their officials gave some information, and they reported in their respective media. So they to aware about what's going on in media on BRI and inside. So Pakistan people rely on our stories and our articles to make their perspective what is going on BRI and how CPAC helped their country and how they change their lives in Pakistan. So this is our job to change perspectives of the Pakistani peoples by our writing skills and about our articles. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Another gentleman coming from Islamabad. Thank you. A small token for you coming from CGTN as well later. Thank you. But as journalists, our stories are not just about the beautiful stories. Our stories should also be about the challenges, the questions, the arguments. I hope when we cover the BRI, we're going to cover it in a balanced and a fair way as we see it, and bring our stories, the story from the ground, to the real people, not only in our countries, but beyond. Thank you once again. Well, as we can see, a very lively audience over there. It must be a lot of pressure for you guys. We have already our 4 speakers sitting with us. Meanwhile, we're also joined by 2 new speakers over there. We have Andy Mok, who is a non-resident fellow at the Center for China and Globalization. Welcome, Andy.
Good to be here.
As far as I know, you're coming from America.
Yes, that's right.
All right, so we have one more nationality on the stage. And also, Ryder, CEO of Development Reimagined, an international development consultancy that's based in Beijing. So Hannah is originally coming from Kenya.
Yes, that's right.
Welcome.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So we have 7 nationalities, right?
We do.
Did I do my math right? On the stage. So let me ask you about this. First of all, to you, Andy. because you were one of the judges. You know, he was one of the judges on the essay contest. So if he hasn't given you high score, you need to figure it out later after the show. Yes. So, but Andy, listening to the 4 beautiful voices and their real stories bring to the stage today, I'm sure it must have brought back a lot of great memories of your being the judge of this contest. What about the stories that you have learned?
No, absolutely, Tian Wei. So I am from the U.S., and what struck me as the judge reading through these essays was that when I was doing my MBA at the Wharton School in Philadelphia, I was also on the admissions committee and read countless essays from some of the most talented, most motivated people from around the world, from China, from India, from France, from the UK. What struck me in reading these essays is that they're even more diverse. We have people from Fiji, from the Maldives, Uganda, Ethiopia, Pakistan. So even more diverse, even more inspiring, and even more exciting.
And Europe as well.
And Europe, of course.
Latin America too.
Yes, yes. And so I think the diversity of voices really struck me. I think also the exciting things that people are doing that were inspired by the Belt and Road really left a very deep impression on me. So quick example, someone in Italy, after they learned about the Belt and Road, wanted to experience it for themselves and drove from Venice to Beijing.
Wow.
And shared some of their experiences along the way. Another person shared a business idea that he came up with after traveling to some of the Belt and Road countries. So I think it really is, it's a platform that is very inspiring and exciting for young people, older people, anyone who really has a dream.
Yeah. Is that person still on the road?
I think they're here. They're actually here in Beijing now.
All right. We hope in the future opportunities we'll be able to invite that person you just mentioned from Venice all the way to Beijing to come over for our special program. But Hannah, I mean, you were not here giving the speeches, but listening to them very carefully.
Of course.
So what is your takeaway out of the 4 talk and stories?
Well, it was interesting. Actually, in many of their personal stories of the infrastructure development that they were talking about, I also have my own infrastructure story. I think anyone living in a developing country at this point will have seen some investment from China and some collaboration between governments.
I figure out what you want to say is, let me tell my infrastructure story.
No, because these were very inspiring, and I think good enough for us to really understand the impact that new infrastructure has on development and on people's lives generally. And that is a very important, these are decisions that governments are making all around the world in partnership with China, and I think it's great to understand and hear a bit more about that.
But what about your infrastructure story? You are making me very curious about this.
It's also just a road. Also, but before the BRI was announced. So it was actually completed in 2011 in Thika Road Highway. Anyone who's from Kenya, you'll know about it.
Anyone?
Over there. Yeah, exactly. Again,
okay.
that also cut traffic, the amount of time that people used to have to commute, and my own family have to commute into town. And it made life a lot easier. Business has sprung up and so on.
Yeah.
That said, we still have to keep on maintaining. We have to continue to provide even more infrastructure options in the country. So this is something, the Belt and Road Initiative, by bringing more opportunities for that development, I hope we can continue to invest even more.
And you know what? I'm very proud that among the contestants that are coming to today's event, we have 2 ladies also. Yeah. 2 lady winners. We should put our hands together, particularly for them. Wonderful. We have a gender equity in terms of BRI as well. Good news. But, besides the good news, there are serious issues that I think it's only fair that we handle it right now. You mentioned some of those even, Mubarak, in your speech. About neocolonialism, about whether China take all. What do you think about that?
Is it the story must be told to the world. The people who spread this criticism only look at their influence in Africa, because we all know that the colonialists were in Africa for over 100 years. But when you go to the real Africa, what is happening in Africa is a poor, not even a poor, no infrastructure. Some of the villages, if, like for instance, where I'm born.
Where?
Yes, it's like, it's not far away from the capital. It's about 60 kilometers. But when you want to access some villages, you cannot go there with a car. You can't go there with even a bike cannot reach there. People just go through bushes. So it's really terrific in most of the African countries. And for those ones who are raising concern that China want to take it all, for them they took all. They took everything. They looted our resources, our oil, and actually some of them are still looting resources in the Democratic Republic of Congo, in Somalia, and in many African countries. So for me, I look at it in a perspective that even before the Belt and Road Initiative, resources, African resources, were taken away. So Belt and Road, China is only coming in to fix the long-term problem of Africa, which is connectivity and improving infrastructure, which is really lacking in most of the African countries.
Well, some are watching today's live show. They might think, oh, Mubarak, of course you are being invited by the China TV. You talk positively about China, and now you are in China, you talk all the positive things about China. Is that true?
I am not an ambassador of China. My role here is to tell the true story that happens in Africa. Tai, can you imagine that majority of Africans cannot access health services because there is no road that connects their village to a city center? Can you imagine? Mothers are dying on a daily basis because the car cannot access their villages.
So the infrastructure is not infrastructure itself.
Exactly.
Really. It's exactly these four young men and women have been talking about. It's not just infrastructure itself.
Look, at a big picture, we've got almost 400 million people still living in poverty on the African continent. We also have financing needs of over $63 billion a year for the continent, which the African governments themselves are not strong enough to pay themselves. You know, they don't raise enough taxes. We're not generating enough economic growth in order for that to happen. So somebody has to be helping, right? Exactly. Somebody does. And when governments look around, especially governments of countries that have now got to a middle income status, because some of them have grown, and of course some of them are growing very fast, but when they get to middle income status, there's certain loans from the World Bank that they can't access and so on. So China, as a provider of infrastructure loans, is very useful and important. And as important also as the private sector. Many African countries are raising finance, Eurobonds, a whole range of different types of finance for infrastructure. This is their decision, their priority.
Their decision, their priority. But you know, before you answer, I even want to jump on this with you, Andy, which is, okay, we have got some problem with the issue of financing.
Yes.
But are we going to trapping ourselves further? Because there's an issue about the so-called debt trap, about Belt and Road Initiative. Andy, first of all, your input on this issue and also, of course, your answer.
Okay, sure. Maybe before I answer the question about this, these allegations of debt traps, because we do have a lot of journalists in our audience today and also, I'm sure, listening or watching. But this idea that I think that what we can all do as journalists is that for a very long time, the journalistic narrative was set in the Anglosphere, you know, first by the UK and then by the United States. So I think there is a certain amount of, one, parochialism, meaning we see the world from only our point of view, our local point of view. Yeah. The second is I think there is a kind of a bigotry and a chauvinism in the United States that if we didn't come up with it, it must not be good. And also that, especially because of the legacy of the Cold War, that if it's communist, it's got to be bad. And there's a kind of intellectual laziness along with that. And I think that what we all can do here, what you guys are doing, and I'm sure people in the audience are doing as well, is telling these stories, these human stories of how building a bridge helps someone go to the airport more quickly, or maybe get a job, visit their grandmother, go to the beach. One of my favorite stories about the Belt and Road is the Mombasa-Nairobi Railway, because some people live to work, but one story I read was about someone who works to live and said, what this railroad let me do is I can go to the beach on the weekends, right? So I think that this is very, very important.
We are working on the weekends.
Yes. So I think I wanted to make that point, that really telling these stories is incredibly important, and the diversity of stories really matters a lot. But now, Tian Wei, to go back to your question on this idea of a debt trap. So as a business person, as an investor, all investors know that the most expensive form of financing is equity, right? Meaning that if you have to give up an ownership share, whether that's in a company, in any type of profit-making or creating an economic surplus, that's the most expensive type of financing. Debt is actually a very, very sound way of paying for this. Now, of course, that assumes that the project is well thought out, there are stable, or at least there are revenue sources, there are ways to cover the cost, there won't be budget overruns, et cetera, et cetera. But of course, we also know that with the Belt and Road, many of these countries, whether it's in Africa, whether it's in Southeast Asia, that there are developments that need to be done. Human capacity building in terms of project management, maybe strengthening local governance. That without these things, there is risk. And that's where I think that these debt trap allegations, like any kind of propaganda, there's always a grain of truth. And the grain of truth is certain projects have encountered problems. But I think we need to look at it in the overall context, that that does not mean that debt is a bad thing, or that the way China's approaching this is incorrect.
Right. If you look at the economies that we talk about here, particularly the six of you represent, for example, the Fiji, and also Maldives. Those are not necessarily geographically huge countries. So how will a relatively small economy be able to handle the debt issue smartly, particularly when it's development into the future, whether it's BRI or other projects? Those are, I'm sure, national debates going on in your country as well. Leslie.
Yeah. Well, with the BRI, it opens up connectivity and enhanced trade and investment. So I believe that through BRI, there'll be more, people are saying that there may be a trade deficit and then you get an influx of Chinese goods in our countries. But through trade, obviously no one country can survive alone. You need to trade with other countries to get on top of the global ladder if you want. So through trade, you'll get goods and services from not only China, other countries as well. And the customer wins at the end of the day. It's a win-win situation. You trade. And if they're saying trade deficit, the government trade deficit cannot be solved at a BRI level. I believe it should be solved at a local level.
I see.
So governments should push for commercial production and trade more with other countries, and balance of trade may act on its own.
Hannah, you want to jump in?
I did, because I wanted to come back to this point as well, and I think it's something which is also raised by the varying experiences that our winners of the competition have set out. Look, one of the roles of journalism is also to investigate, right? And to look at different cross-country experiences. Put what is happening in your country in context, or put what is happening in a particular locality in context across the country, etc. And I think this is something which is still a work in progress with the Belt and Road. Whatever issue it is, whether it's debt issues, whether it's trade issues, the reality is that there are a lot of challenges that countries still need to deal with. If development was easy, we would have done it by now, right?
But
If it was easy,
And
we
the
would have
earlier
one now.
experiences did not teach us much because there were a lot of problems earlier, though.
Of course.
So
there has
we
been
have
a lot
to
of
learn
wastage.
from the very beginning
Yes.
to do it, how to do it better.
Correct.
Why
And
does
how
it
to do it among emerging and developing economies, and also bring in developed economies onto the platform as well.
Well, to weigh in about the Maldivian situation, well, the bridge actually is something which was deemed impossible by a lot of people. They came, did surveys, went back, but now we see it, and it's drastically changed the situation for us. And I'm somebody who uses it on a daily basis, so this has drastically changed the situation. I think the debt
I
that is
remember you were
incurred.
telling me when you talk about the bridge
Yes.
that on the beaches there were a lot of unfound stuff because people have to walk a long distance and you will
Yes.
never be able to find something you throw over there.
Yes.
And I guess right now you wouldn't have too many lost and found
Yes,
along the
yes.
beach.
Anyways, the debt that is incurred through the BRI, I think it's comparatively very low to the national debt that the countries have. But these projects, the BRI projects, actually brings in a lot of development infrastructure-wise. And I think that matters because there are loans that we've been taking from people to hold other kinds of events or even to do small projects, which doesn't really add up. The debt incurred through those projects are much more, and the projects don't really reap any benefit. So the bridge project, for example, we can see it. We've taken loans and done many things with other countries, but instead of getting a huge benefit and a better future for the Maldivian people, it just gave us a huge debt and a little positive.
And maybe just to quickly add to that,
Yes.
I think what's new with the Belt and Road Initiative, because aid, for instance, to places like Africa has been going on for decades without, maybe not as successful as many would have hoped. But I think what's new about what China brings to the table, it's not just the financing, but it's also technical expertise, it's the products,
Yes.
and it's also the project management. Because whether you're building a
Capacity
bridge,
building.
an
Yes.
airport, a highway, the ability to organize and manage this is very, very important. And it's clear that, we've seen in China with the high-speed expressways, the high-speed rails, the airports, that China truly is world-class in all of these. And I think that's what's new, that, in my view, is also underreported.
Yes, of
It's
course.
not just about China's experiences, in fact. It's also about how other developing and emerging economies have been doing their own things. If they have good examples to share, this platform will be one wonderful thing for them to work on. I want to come back to Russia because compared to the other economies, we have quite a big economy, Russia. Oscar, what do you think about this debate about debt trap and neocolonialism, all of these accusations?
Well, it's a great question, actually, and a number of increased physical connections, and that's what Belt and Road is mostly right now, of course, creates some risks of over-connectivity, and especially when you're dealing with such a large economy as China.
Right.
So these issues have to be discussed by both the participant countries and the potential members of the Belt and Road Initiative. And here I couldn't agree with Andy more. This kind of discussions, honest discussions, they of course take intellectual courage. And that has to be done on all sides. At the same time, Belt and Road projects already have managed to boost manufacturing capacity and boost local employment in a number of places, actually contributing to the local industries. And if in the short run, the risks of over-connectivity are quite certain, it's also true that in the long run, connections built by Belt and Road are connections going both ways. And it also means that for participant countries, that is connecting to China, the largest consumer market in the world. And in the long run, there is no doubt that it will boost trade both ways, buying from China, but also selling to China.
Really?
Well,
That is a question over there.
we have to work on that.
We have to work on that because I have
Yes.
to work on this too. This is coming from outside. This is like actually a social media platform. We got a lot of questions coming from viewers watching our live show right now. And one of the questions really is related to what you have just said. So will Belt and Road Initiative only mean that more Chinese goods in my country and more trade deficit that we are going to have with China? That's the question. Will it be that way? Hannah?
Look, we're talking about personal experiences. Many people's personal experience is about infrastructure development. Other people's personal experiences are also about goods made in China, all over the world, literally. At the same time, it is an issue. With African countries, for example, 40 of them in 2016 were having a trade deficit with China. So this is something very live. At the same time, the last Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, there was a commitment from the Chinese government to do more to open up the Chinese market to African goods, and I expect also from Latin America, the Pacific, and so on. But that needs a lot of work. It also needs a lot of work in partnership with Africans. So I hope that in terms of the way that the BRI continues, it is actually something which is much more participatory, much more focused on what do countries that are in trade deficit, how has that happened? What are the real barriers? How can those be addressed? How do they actually get to enter this amazing, huge market?
While you were talking about it and sophisticatedly illustrating your points, I was thinking, without infrastructure, how can you transport those goods to China? How can you transport those exports to the other parts of the world?
Sure.
You have beautiful fruits back at home, but they will only get rotten if you don't have the way to transport it to the consumers who aspire to have them.
But this, this actually also surprised me, is because in my country, for instance, the trade deficit of Uganda and China is not as big as that of Uganda and India. But it has never been a concern. I don't know why it is so much a concern between Uganda and China, and not Uganda and India, which actually is a bit bigger than any other country. But the gist of the point here is these trade deficits may be discussed in universities, institutes, and whatever, in international platforms, but they cannot be, they can be handled locally, because an example, a simple example, my country's responsibility is to produce quality and quantity. China will come for my products if they are good. I don't need to fight. I don't need to go back to Kampala and fight Moutai wine. Moutai shouldn't come here. I just need to make a good Moutai better than the one of Chinese.
Obviously, somebody really enjoyed the hard liquor.
But I'd like to add something to this question of trade deficits, because, I mean, this is actually a very difficult question to answer, because with this type of activity, there's always winners and losers. So we need to bear in mind, too, that if China, if the US, if France makes better, cheaper products for Ugandans, Ugandan consumers benefit. Now, of course, some Ugandan producers will lose out because they can't compete. So I think this is actually, there really are no simple answers, but this is what most classical conventional economists would say. This is the role of government, so that we want to maximize benefit for consumers while ensuring a level playing field for our producers.
The role of government, as you say, is exactly that. And it is to address market failures. And there are market failures here. It is difficult to enter the Chinese market for certain types of goods. They have certain types of clearance. It's also difficult in some ways to understand the Chinese consumer. Not every African who does manufacture knows anything about this country. So there are some market failures that governments actually can address and can invest in. And if there is a co-investment from China, then that is even better.
And
But I
it's
think,
not
Anna,
just the Chinese government
Yeah.
or the other governments,
Exactly.
but also the private sectors. The different
Of
kinds of
course.
players of the market need to get involved. And more transparency, which has a lot to do with the work that our journalists sitting here today, coming from emerging and developing countries. I also want you to jump in on that, about the trade. You know, Russia and China, you also have trade deficit, but of course a very different nature. So you think about it, how to see this very big global issue of trade deficit and the way trade flows, vis-a-vis one of the very specific issues, which is Belt and Road Initiative. How will all of these issues work together and probably help us to find some good answers, as we say?
Well, one helpful way of looking at BRI today is probably understanding this not really as an end product already there, but more as a process which is ongoing. And This has been clear already in BRI changing name, changing nature, changing some of its framework since the launch. But it's also true that the situation of trade deficit, for example, it has applied to many countries in my region and all over the world already prior to the BRI. So this is not some kind of byproduct of the Belt and Road. But it's just a clear asymmetry in economic relations, which has been there for a long time. And Belt and Road actually provides us a platform to approach these issues with government actors and also private sector, of course. And we have to understand that the way that we focus on the BRI narrative right now, it is an opportunity to reassess many of the relationship and many of the economic connections which have been there for decades.
It's not just about trade. Yeah. It's also about really how to improve people's lives. From the country of Fiji, Maldives, you have beautiful beaches. And from many of the African countries, from Russia as well, you have wonderful farmland and the wild, wild west. So how to prevent environmental degradation, how to make sure it is green investment in all of these economies. Andy, I have to go to you about that.
Well, I think that's one issue that I think everyone in the world is thinking about. Climate change, sustainability.
Exactly.
And I think BRI, is something that's so important that it has to be considered as well.
It's a window opportunity to re-examine it, isn't it?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say maybe re-examine, but I think also that a lot of these issues are in some sense new. So I think it's a chance to create policies, well, I think starting with concepts, policies, strategies, procedures to make the BRI initiative sustainable.
Hannah?
Well, I also fully agree. I worked on climate change issues for over 6 years at the UN, and it is really, really important that green growth is the starting point for, especially in terms of infrastructure building. We need to be focusing on green growth from the beginning. That said, again, this is an area of challenge. Many countries do not have green standards. Many countries do not impose those green standards when they're discussing infrastructure projects and so on. They're just kind of happy that somebody has said, here is some money for some infrastructure projects. So we need, again, there are opportunities for Chinese companies, Chinese banks as well, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank too, and then governments when they are negotiating to try to make sure that they are meeting the highest environmental standards. We really must push for it. This is the future for our, I have a 3-year-old son, and I just pray that everything will get better.
Every one of us wants to have a better environment, and that is why
we talked. Sorry.
Go ahead, Andy.
We talked about this earlier too. I mean, this is one of the challenges facing Africa, that it's not just infrastructure, because you need to invest in human capital, you need to address sustainability issues, and these need to happen because you over-invest in infrastructure, but you're still going to be held back because these other things haven't caught up. And I think this is what makes it so challenging. But as Hannah, you're saying, but there are also critical issues that have to be addressed.
But if I could be just frank here, the developed economies too, because we see some of developed economies do not necessarily focusing on climate change as the rest of the world does. So I think this is an issue that all of us have to work hard, and we hope the Belt and Road Initiative, with many concentrating on the green development, hopefully for the future, will be an opportunity for us to emphasize and re-emphasize on this point once again, not only for the emerging economies, but also for all our economies as a whole. Now, I think we're really running out of time for now, but I still have one social media question that I have to bring to you, which I'm reading right now. So, it's rather related to our last question. So, what do you think about the sustainability of BRI? I think maybe the question means how sustainable will the BRI projects be for the future, and how do you see the sustainability within all the projects that are linked to the BRI? Maybe from 2 different layers. Can we maybe have every one of you to talk about it, because we're having quite a young panel here on the stage. The average age is probably 35 or less. So let's have you talk about the sustainable future, because it's our future. Oscar, I see the lights in your eyes. You want to go first?
Sure. Well, the way that BRI works right now on the supply side, as already mentioned, mostly just being propelled by China's own success in infrastructure development. But we also might want to look at the demand side a bit more. And it's not about infrastructure just being built and popping out in random places. It's about meeting some strategic needs of certain countries. And probably this is the only way to really ensure that that would be sustainable in any sense of the word. Because the narrative, the way it's constructed right now, many people just expect that China bringing these large amounts of money to a certain country, that it is somehow supposed to allow this country to replicate China's economic rise, which is quite a simplistic assumption to make, I'd say. It is only if the local projects meet the needs and meet the requirements for the local economy that it can really be sustainable in the long run.
So it has to match. That's your point,
yes,
isn't it? What about for you?
Well,
Sarah?
certainly I agree with him too, but more so because it's a globalized world. To sustain any project, we have to help each other out. I think the BRI and even other initiatives by other countries should continue to focus on developing all areas rather than just one area. I think the bridge is new. We are very new to maintaining such infrastructure. So we'll continue to need the assistance of other countries to actually maintain it and to further actually connect the other islands as well. There's many islands. We have 1,200 islands. So I think not all of them, but some of them should be connected. But in order for any country to develop sustainably, I think it is always because one lacks something that the other has. So they can share this. I think shared prosperity is important.
Shared future, as you say.
Yes.
Very important, Sarah. And Andy?
So I would look at it this way. If we're going to talk about sustainability, well, first, I think of the Belt and Road Initiative in an IT way, that it's a system of systems. And in order for a system of systems to work, we first have to have political sustainability, meaning that all of the countries that are party to it have to have a political agreement and agree how to solve disputes, how to make it go forward. I think that's the first kind of sustainability. The second kind of sustainability then is economic sustainability. So can these projects create enough of an economic surplus to make it worthwhile economically for everybody that's participating? And then finally, as we touched on, environmental sustainability, right? That we have to build this in so it's progressing in an integrated fashion. Because as we've seen with, maybe we could call it overdevelopment, that these economic externalities of development, you get pollution, you get congestion, you have health problems, things like that, that has to be built in as well.
Right.
So I think these signs, we're 5 years in, are very, very positive, that all of these kinds of sustainability targets or requirements are being met.
Right. It is an ongoing process. We are starting it. And the most important thing is we're going to stick to it. That's very important. And what about for you, Hannah? We work this way.
Sustainability is at the heart of the UN and what countries committed to in 2015, the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Many countries have sustainable development plans. The African continent has got Agenda 2063, which again has sustainability at the heart of it. And China also has a sustainable development plan. At the same time, my consultancy wouldn't exist if sustainability was easily coming to the fore, if development was easy. We are here, we work in Beijing with our clients all around the world because it is not easy to get sustainability, and we have to work much harder. We have to address those market failures. We have to address the lack of information from the Chinese side about what's needed, and the other side about what's possible to get with China, with a Chinese partnership. So we hope that we can continue to do much more.
We need a bridge, not only literally, but also the understanding. Right. There we go. And Leslie.
Well, Tian, I think it's important that we examine the areas of BRI, strengthening cooperation. It talks about enhanced facilities for countries. It talks about financial coordination, talks about people-to-people bonding. So in that way, I think that BRI, it also, since it focuses on infrastructure as well, It helps to create more jobs, and in a way, it's self-sustaining, and it's good for other sectors in countries like, for example, Fiji, tourism. We need developments through BRI to help us sustain the tourism industry in our country.
To bring in new momentum all the time, make it sustainable.
Yeah, definitely.
Beautifully said, Leslie. Last but not least, Barack.
Yes. I think it's, I would agree with most of my colleagues, but if China maintains its principle on mutual respect and non-interference into internal affairs of sovereign countries, I think it will be very easy to sustain this relationship. And at the same time, the biggest task is on us Africans, on how best we can put to use the infrastructure that has been, put in place under the Belt and Road Initiative. And I know if our governments, for instance, emphasize and of course encourage people to produce more, to make use of these projects, of these roads, of the railways, I think it will be easy to sustain this, because it will then mean that the production will be high, and of course employment will be created, and even the livelihood of the people of Africa would have improved.
It's not just about BRI, it's also about all of us improve ourselves.
Exactly.
Continuously.
Exactly.
Great point. Mubarak, Leslie, Hannah, Oscar, Sarah, and Andy, thank you so much, you guys and girls, for being with us. Thank you. Did they do a good job? Lively voices coming from emerging and developing countries. Well, this is wrapping up today's special edition of our program. This is a live show you are seeing on CGTN. I was thinking when you were talking, what it would be like if we think back 5 years from now. 5 years ago, we were in Beijing in a Sunday afternoon talking about our realities and certainly talking about our future, shared future, our families, our friendships. With that beautiful note, I realized passion rebuilds the world for all of us. And I see that is happening this afternoon on this stage and over there with our audience. So let's put our hands together and once again celebrate this moment. Thank you so much. Thank you. You want to join for a dance? Thank you. We decided to dance a little bit. Anyone want to join us? Yes, can we do that? Join, good. Just feel free to come over. I see that gentleman from Nairobi. All right, over there. Please join. Okay. Do we have the camera focusing us? We want to celebrate this moment. Okay, we can. Feel free. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay.
Yeah, likewise.
How are you guys doing? Okay?